Hello, good evening, and welcome on a very gorgeous June evening. Welcome to anybody listening online. Just to remind members, this meeting is being recorded and will be published after the meeting as well. I don't believe that there are any fire drills planned, so if the alarm goes off, we will assemble in the usual place in the car park. Just one note from me before I move into apologies. Councillor Harvey and I attended the Leicestershire, Leicester City and Rutland Joint Health Scrutiny panel on the 16th of June. I have taken notes. They will be typed up and shared with all members to have an overview of that meeting. Apologies I have received from Councillors Carr and Councillor Harvey, Canon Andrew Reid and Andreas Menzies, and I think I'm up to date on that. Thank you. Item number 2, record of the meeting which was held on the 5th of June 2025 and are on pages 5 to 8 of the agenda. Is everybody happy who was here that those are an accurate record of the meeting? If so, I'm happy to look for a proposer. Thank you, Councillor Wilby. Do I have a seconder? Choices. Thank you, Councillor Linda Chatfield. And all those in favour? Excellent. Any abstentions? And that's 2 abstentions. Sorry, I'm cheerfully whizzing on. Lovely. Item number 3 is actions under rising. I believe those are covered in the bulk of the agenda, in that I have captured the issues raised from all members have had an opportunity to feed into that, and that is on item 9, and I think otherwise we're up to date on actions.
Yeah, unfortunately, my microphone is...
Would you like to share my microphone? Or will that jig the system, to use a technical term? Right.
So that's fine. There were no...
Right, what we will do is just pause while we establish our connectivity issues. Right. Do we know if that's actually being broadcast or not? Although... Right. Yeah, I'm red.
That's working. That's working. That's working.
Right, members, we will... We won't quite start yet. We're just moving to find a microphone that works. Right, welcome back. Thank you for the patience to anybody listening online, and well done, Jane, for your swift and patient resolution of the issue. Right, I will return to the agenda, which is item number 4. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? No, I'll take that as none there. Item number 5, petitions, deputations and questions. I don't believe we have any.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item number 6, question with notice from members.
None received, Chair.
Item number 7, notice of motion from members.
None received, Chair.
Item number 8, consideration of any matter referred to the committee in relation to the call-in of a decision.
No call-ins have been received, Chair.
Thank you very much, in which case we will move to item number 9, which is a collation of issues raised by councillors. After our last meeting, making the note that actually scrutiny is not just the panel members, it is the whole council, and of course focusing on what residents wish to explore and look into. I was very, very pleased with the response from the councillors. All wards were represented bar one in Oakham, and we've ended up with a comprehensive list of regularly raised issues. The aim is to look at where scrutiny can add value. Clearly, there's an awful lot of work that goes on in the council, and actually, even if it is a case of identifying work that is already happening, I think that that will be important, that we're increasing people's understanding of that. What I would like to do, and I am mindful it is a hot evening, is to go through each one, add notes to it. I will then be adding that in a different colour and recirculating to all members so that there is a sense of what is happening with those issues. If everybody is happy with that. Please also note that when I was putting this together and filling in the columns in terms of work that is already being undertaken, that was from my recollection. It wasn't intended to be an exhaustive list, so there may well be additions there. And also thank you ever so much, Councillor Johnson, who alerted me to the fact I'd attributed economic development to him, and obviously I will amend that. It is indeed Councillor Powell who is the portfolio holder for property and economic development. So I'm proposing to start at the top of the column. We have the first one that has been raised across the county in 8 wards in total: highway safety, including speeding, junctions and motorbikes. This sits in the Places Directorate with Councillor Wise. Work that's currently being undertaken, I've got the Road Safety Partnership and the Safer Rutland Partnership, whose remit this is. I wonder, though, if it would be helpful, as it has been mentioned so much, that we do ask for an update of how that is being dealt with. I gather there's an alteration to how people communicate issues from their wards, from parishes, making sure there is a difference between enforcement, that goes to the police, and where it is a case of actually a highways engineering issue. Are there any other sort of comments with that? But that was my gut reaction. Yes, Councillor Payne.
Can I just say that recently a lot of the parishes were doing some very good work with speed cameras on a lot of the roads, because I drive around a lot. It's not, it wasn't actually in my ward, but and they were having I saw a group out in Preston doing a really good job of making it clear to people they were going too fast. So maybe we might want to look into that and encourage more wards, more parishes to do that. And the second thing, which is junctions specific to ward, I'm afraid that once again in Oakham is that blessed crossing, the level crossing, which kept me back for 12 minutes tonight.
And we've got the level crossing coming up later, which I have noted that is out of our jurisdiction. I mean, that is Network Rail, so it is there in the public domain. The parish speed watch, my understanding is there's a limited amount of resource, so it is a limited number of parishes that can actually take part. However, I do think it would be useful if we had an update on that community safety partnership, so that it's raising its profile by putting it in the public domain afresh, and also it might be an opportunity for some questions to go back to that safety partnership, if people are happy with that.
I think also, just to acknowledge the work they're doing, because it's citizens getting involved and doing something very positive, and I think we should encourage that, Chair. I'm sure you agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sense of it's everybody's business, and ultimately it is about drivers making that choice about whether or not they are going at the right speed for the road. So what I have put, learning from communities, good practice, because I think what would be helpful is if I contacted Councillor Wise to say that Scrutiny would like to have an update on that, including the opportunity for good practice to be shared. Yes, Councillor Waller.
I would wonder what value added there might be from that. The Scrutiny needs to add value to the process. I think it's valuable for members, if they want the minutes of the Community Safety Partnership, the Road Safety Partnership or the Safer Rutland Partnership, to be given the minutes, because you have a right to access them. But asking members or officers to do updates above and beyond the minutes. You could be doing that forever, and I want to know what the outcome is going to be for the people of Rutland. If you were undertaking a full and thorough review of speeding, and that was one of the elements you wanted as part of it, and you were going to come back to us and come back to the council and say you need to hold the police feet to the fire a lot more because speeding is actually a police issue, not a county council issue, and so on, then, fair enough. But it feels to me that it's more of a fishing exercise without any clear aim in mind. I mean, you've got a lot of items on your list, 17 of them in total.
Oh, sorry, I'm going to actually pause you there, Councillor Waller, because I will be going through each of those, and I'll answer your question first. I don't think receiving minutes in the council style is sufficient because it is a note of what's being discussed and not the detail. Speeding has been raised, and actually there does need to be a fishing exercise first and foremost, because otherwise we don't know what it is that we are wishing to interrogate, whether that is an issue of are we getting sufficient resource from the police? Is there something that we need to do with our highways engineering? So I am minded to say, Councillor Waller, that whether or not the update is an item on the agenda is a very different issue, but we do need to have an update on what is currently happening so that we know which fish we are going to pick out. And I would absolutely suggest that the minutes aren't a sufficient desktop exercise for that. They're a starting point in terms of what is being discussed, but it does not offer the detail of what is being discussed.
I have to disagree with you there.
I'm just going to bring in one of the panel members. I'll bring in Councillor Wilby.
Thank you, Chair. I fall in between both stools on this one. If you look through this list, I see poor old Councillor Christine Wise is the fall guy right the way through, and she has been the fall guy for several months on lots of hot topics. And my own gut feel is that we should let her sort out her department and do the actions, and then I think it's good that we get a report, a sort of small how goes it report, a page, I would think, at some stage. But I think going for a full scrutinisation is too early at the moment. There's too much going on, and it's all in her back garden.
Councillor Lambert.
I think there's probably three different ways to look at this. There's a community speed watch, which Councillor Payne brought up. I'd be interested to see sort of if there's any evidence about the impact that has, what the uptake's like at the minute, because I know when Uppingham applied for it, I was surprised how easy it was just to get it. We just asked and it sort of happened eventually. So I'd be interested to see what the uptake's like, whether it's something we're promoting to parish councils adequately, and then leading on from that, if there's any evidence to council has as to whether it's had an impact in the longer term. Because if there is a low uptake and we've got more capacity to do it and the impact is actually happening, we may as well be doing more with it, clearly. The second thing is thinking about the sort of resource we get from the police, which you touched on. I don't know how much value it would add, but it might be of interest to Scrutiny to have an opportunity to ask the police the level of resource they're putting in. Seeing as it has been raised universally across the county, it seems like that would be time well spent. And the third thing is motorbikes, which in Uppingham is particularly frustrating, but I'm not sure what we can do about that other than working with the community, working with the businesses. But in terms of where Scrutiny can hopefully add some value or at least speak up for our residents, I'd say it's the Community Speed Watch and the police resource.
Councillor Waller.
Thank you. You can probably require, Jane will correct me on this, whether it's an invite or a require, the Police and Crime Commissioner to come to Scrutiny. We have, and this is one of the points I want to make generally, we get a lot of anecdote in Rutland from our mates in the pub, through our parish councils, to reading social media. But anecdotes isn't information. And on this one in particular, on speeding, we actually don't have a particularly high conviction rate for speeding compared with other parts of LLR. And I don't know, and why would I, whether that's because the police don't come and bother to do the checking here, or whether it's the drivers are much safer. So the community speed watch that we have, which is invaluable because it alerts the community safety partnership to where there are issues, and they then can look to see whether there are any traffic calming measures that can be put in place, because that's all we can do as a county council. But then you and me and Andrew has to decide where the money's coming from, and that's part of the budget setting process, because we allocate a certain amount for road safety, clearly, but it doesn't go as far as the villages are asking for, and it hasn't any year I've been on the council since 2011. So, you know, there are a sort of a raft of issues involved with it, but we have to start, I think, or you have to start with the data. And we find with the community speed watch, the majority of people who are speeding live in the village they're speeding in. Now, that won't apply to Uppingham and Oakham, but there will be an element of that. That speeding happens at particular times of the day, which is not surprising to anyone. But the biggest surprise to most of the villages is that it is not as high as they think it is, because people perceive focus speeding when they're not. So all of those are sort of quite interesting facets. But unfortunately, when a community speed watch happens, the police cannot prosecute on the back of that.
So I'm just mindful, Councillor Wally, you have drawn my attention to the fact there are 17, and I think Councillor Lambert's point, and I am coming to you, Councillor Chatfield, about having a feedback on the impact of community speed watch, I would hope would cover those things that you've said precisely with the hard data.
Well, I've just given you, but that's my point. I have given you the feedback that we have. Community speed watch and speeding is discussed regularly at the Parish Council Liaison Committee and has been for a number of years. And indeed, Rupert Matthews has been to that committee. And all I've told you is the outcome of those meetings. And I suspect Councillor Johnson can confirm that, because he attends them as a
I
chairman
think
of
with
a parish
respect,
council.
Councillor, some data would be useful.
Yes, but what data? We have loads and loads and loads of data. We need a steer from Scrutiny about what data.
Perhaps if I could perhaps go to the panel, then we would possibly end up with a steer, Councillor Waller. Councillor Chatfield.
Thank you. Just a couple of things that occurred to me. We keep talking about motorcycles. Now, are we making any sort of distinction there? Because there's the serious motorcyclists who join in clubs, which probably in Uppingham quite a lot because there's a Harley Davidson dealership there. Or there's the guys that go around on scooters with balaclavas on and a lot of times no helmets. So are we just going to put a blanket sort of a target of motorcyclists? And just one other thing, road safety is my thing anyway. This is not anecdotal. How many more accidents do there have to be in Manton, along Manton Bridge, fatal as well, before we do something about it or get a speed camera?
Very good question, and I've noted it down. One thing I would say on that, we do have our KPIs, and performance management will come up, and one of those KPIs is fatal or seriously injured. In terms of moving this on, I've taken notes on things that are specific. So, for example, it would be useful to have, I think, an overview of the data of the community speed watch. So, in terms of numbers of cars caught speeding, I think actual numbers of people who are living within their own village, so it's specific data. I think as well, it would be useful for the panel members certainly to have the last set of minutes Also, I mean, I do acknowledge that speeding does come up a lot and it is discussed in panels. And I also acknowledge that there needs to be something specific for us to add value to. But I would suggest in the first instance, an electronic update would be useful, which panel members can then look at over email. If we decide that we'd actually like to have a sort of private get together just to go through it, then I think that that would be a reasonable thing to do, and then it would be very specific. But I think initially those things have come up. The point about distinction about motorbikes, it would be interesting to know from the police what they record. So, for example, they've caught a motorbike speeding, do they write down the CC, etc., etc.? Is the panel happy with that approach on this issue? And obviously, this is a public meeting. Clearly, if things spring to mind after the meeting, that doesn't mean it's an end of the discussion, but I have got the notes of what we would like more information on. Yes, Councillor Chatfield.
Sorry. I was involved in the last community speed watch in Oakham, and I got the impression from the person who ran it that she handed over all the data and said, "Oh, thanks very much, get back to you," and that was the last she ever heard of it. So they don't seem to take it particularly seriously or value it in that way.
So that sounds as though it's feedback to the volunteers that certainly if we're looking at good practice and we value it as a community, I do think that's essential that there is feedback given. What would be interesting to know if that's an isolated incident, one of those things, or if there isn't actually a process for feedback. So that's really, really helpful. Thank you, Councillor Chatfield. Councillor Wilby.
Thanks. I would just say that after our speed watch, we've had good feedback on where the speeding was, how many people, and all the other bits and pieces. So, and it's come fairly quickly afterwards, so it's been very useful.
Brilliant. So what we'll need to do is, hopefully that is the norm and that was the exception, but we definitely ought to just check whether that is the case. Highways maintenance, and again, Councillor Wilby, I absolutely take your point for Councillor Wise. Looking at this, I felt that we had the annual capital maintenance programme, which Councillor Wise presents, and it always has a very good covering report explaining the reasons for decisions, accepting that there isn't enough budget to do everything. The section 19, we've already got flooding as a pending item to come back to scrutiny, so I don't think there's sort of anything additional to add there. We also have our performance management reports that come out, and also in terms of the quality of repairs, my understanding is that there is a system in place internally already to inspect repairs and make sure that they are up to scratch and follow on that. Was there anything else anybody? So I felt that that was possibly covered already within our work programme, but I'm very happy to be disagreed with. Councillor Lambert.
Sorry, just a quick one, and perhaps not directly related to this point, but I think there's definitely sort of scope for a wider piece of work on Fix My Street, and like the absolute lack of faith people have in reporting on there. And I saw, well, I can't remember who it was also, when you responded to your email, mentioned that there's a perception that things just vanish into it. And it's not specifically highways maintenance, but often it is highways maintenance. And all the things listed about the quality of repairs and the response time, from my experience, is pretty good when it does get picked up. The biggest complaint is from people who drive into like Northamptonshire, and the roads are completely different there. So it's not as they usually complain about, it's the neighbouring authorities. But the Fix My Street thing and the perceived failure of it to be picked up on is probably an issue.
Councillor Waller.
Fix My Street is definitely an issue. Fix My Street is a national piece of software. When Rutland originally bought it, I don't know how many years ago, a lot of years ago, they didn't buy all its functionality. And as bits get updated and upgraded, clearly if you haven't got all the functionality, you're not getting all the upgrades. And in any case, it didn't even at the outset do everything we wanted it to do. And I'm not sure it ever could because of the way it was designed. So you put something on, it then gets passed to highway. Oh, this is briefly what happens. It gets passed to highways to be actioned. It gets actioned one way or another, but there is no response loop back to the person who put it on in the first place. So you know your pothole got repaired because you've seen it's been repaired, but when it's judged not to need repairing, and as you know, there are certain criteria around when a repair's carried out or not, you don't get the feedback saying it's not deep enough or it's not wide enough or whatever the reason might be. Now, the council is aware of this, is looking to have a new system. It's will be supported by something like, not something like, I beg your pardon, something called Salesforce. But we have had in other areas some teething troubles with Salesforce. Not surprising because everybody gets teething troubles with new IT software, as we all know. And so at this moment in time, we cannot be confident when the new system will be in place. We are hoping it will be January next year, but there is more testing and so on to be carried out on that. But I quite agree with you, it's totally unsatisfactory as it currently is.
Thank you, Councillor. That's very useful because I've got something on that, but I'll come to you next, Councillor Chatfield.
It has to be said, we're not alone with this. Fix My Street, it does have its problems, but the system they use in Oadby and Wigston, I only know that because I worked there and I had to use it, it's just as useless. That's called Love My Street. And until I actually threaten them with something, they've got nothing done.
It's always nice to know you're not alone, Councillor Chatfield. What I'm wondering, because I think that if residents have taken the time to report things, and in fairness, they're obviously not playing the role of the inspector, but it does mean that we are aware of defects. Clearly, they need to not lose faith in the fact that, oh, there's no point telling anyone. In light of a new system potentially coming in January 26, would it be sensible to actually put not Fix My Street, but the how we report a need for road repairs later on in this municipal year? If there's a delay, Jane, you're slightly looking at me with raised eyebrows. If there's a delay in the new system going in, clearly we're not going to hold Cabinet's feet to the fire because that's utterly useless and doesn't do anything. But I do think we need to see that, but when the new one's in, because I'm assuming the new one is being designed on the basis of the issues with the old one. Councillor Johnson.
Just a point of information, really, because obviously this lies in my area. So Salesforce is a platform, and what we're doing is we're implementing Salesforce to be if you like, the baseline operating system on which other services are built. So at the moment they're focusing on the customer service area, and we've learned quite a bit from doing that. There have been some glitches, but that's not really connected to the places area and things like Fix My Street yet. So the plan is to start converting all our systems across to the Salesforce platform at some time over the next 12 months maximum. But departments will go at different times.
Just to throw in a curveball, panel, and I will come to you, Councillor Wilby, would it be useful then to broaden it to a hypothetical one of customer services, which is our sort of obviously our sort of main interface for things, and identify what people are contacting for, or should we stick with the highway specific one? Oh, I'll just come to Councillor Wilby, who's...
I understand the new systems coming in. I don't understand them, but I understand we've got new ways of systems coming in. But I'm a very simple chap, and as I understand it, Fix My Street or any of these are attention getters to our staff that there is a problem in the parish. I cannot see why there isn't a mandrolic system of recording it for each of the parishes with a time on it and says, okay, I've seen you've got a thing here, a quick holding reply goes out to the parish clerk, who then can track it, downstream. It just seems to me they must have been able to do it in the old days, and I think, we should be able to cope with it. We've got telephones, we've got computers, we've got all these sort of things which come in telling us there's a problem. What we want what our parishioners want is they want someone to acknowledge that the problem has been taken on and something is being done about it, and there will be an update at some stage.
Councillor Chatfield.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with you in theory, Councillor Wilby. My understanding, as in I have talked to the portfolio holder, is that we simply do not have the staff resource to go back in each case. There is a record within the Highways Department of all the complaints that come in and how they're dealt with. It is managed internally. But what we don't have is admin support in there to actually make sure it goes back to the customer. And that's what Salesforce is supposed to be able to help with. And I think the Chairman's question about whether it should be a wider issue looking at our interface with customers and our customer communication, actually, and those weren't the words you used, Chairman, and I can't remember the actual words you used, so I apologise for that. But I think it's a good point, because one of the things I wanted to say early on about scrutiny was that everything that you do, if it's going to add value, it's useful to start looking at the data. And when you look at the data, one of the things you will see is that our customer complaints have gone up. And I don't know whether that's because we're doing things less well or because we changed our customer complaint system to make it easier for people to make complaints and us to record them. Could have been either. And I haven't analysed where those complaints are related. So it could be all of the complaints are about home to school transport, say. I don't know that. Because it was only today that I was actually thinking about it, if I'm honest. But clearly, it is a general issue, and it will cover all the service areas. It won't be just the highways ones. So I just wanted to say that, and there is a legitimacy in that we have some data to back up doing it.
Thank you. Yeah, that is a. Yeah, I'll come back to that. Councillor Chatfield.
Just two things. Councillor Waller's point about the complaint. It's probably a bit of both, really, isn't it? It probably makes it easier to, if it's easy to complain, people will complain, but it might be getting worse, and without the data, not know. Just the other point about on Councillor Wilby's point. In the old days, yes, it would get done quicker because we probably had a council workforce, and it would get done rather than being contracted out. It's a bit like housing as well, isn't it? We actually, I mean, that's the real elephant in the room, isn't it? It's about housing. We wouldn't have all the issues with housing associations if we had council houses. Sorry, I bang on about this, but
oh no, it's a reasonable thing to repeat the message. So, in terms of role for scrutiny, and I am mindful with this agenda, there is quite a lot of fact finding in the first instance. Are you happy that I will be asking for customer services data in the first instance? And thank you, Councillor Waller. I think that sense of, what do we get the most inquiries about? What do we get the most complaints about? And see if then that is the point that we're doing a bit more detailed work with that. Could I suggest, panel, that we actually take this out of the meeting where we list questions that we might want to have? And Jane, I'm calling this a desktop exercise. And also, Jane, do feel free, either now or outside of the meeting. I don't want to overwhelm officers with requests for data. I would hope most of the data is easy to get. And I've also noted the point, Councillor Chatfield, in terms of being stretched with resource. If Fix My Street is actually down to the fact there aren't enough bodies on the ground, me as the chair saying, oh, can I have this and can I have that, is not helping that situation. So that we'll deal with that in a sensible fashion. We'll use common sense, Jane. Councillor Waller.
Can I suggest you also ask for data on compliments?
And I believe they are covered in our reports, our performance management. There's always a section on complaints and a section on compliments. And I think that's absolutely the yin and the yang.
Yes, thank you. And the analysis of them and the consideration is actually the province of the Audit and Risk Committee. But that doesn't mean there isn't a role for scrutiny in looking at our customer service generally.
Yeah, no, absolutely taken. In fact, that is on one of my actions to meet the Chair of Audit and Risk to make sure scrutiny and audit and risk are working in a beautiful symbiotic relationship. Oh, it wouldn't it? The next one is control and development. The items that have been raised, I feel that they are being covered by the local plan, the fact that we have a local plan working group, the fact that we've got a national planning policy framework due to be refreshed, and we've got neighbourhood plans. So in terms of adding value, I'm not convinced that scrutiny is the right place. And we've also, of course, got our planning committee. Are people happy that basically we've got the bases covered on the issues that have been raised? Happy days? Right. Moving on. Water quality. Now, although this was only raised in one ward, clearly all members, and for the benefits of the public, Councillor Beggy, in fact, shared data suggesting that Rutland had sort of some of the poorest water in the country. Obviously, I will come to you, Councillor Payne. I'm noting that as a local authority, I don't think it's within our jurisdiction. However, I do wonder whether it is right that I contact Anglian Water and Severn Trent to acknowledge that this has been raised as a concern by councillors, and if they could please give us feedback, to verify the data that has been shared and what their data tells us, because if there's a difference, I would like to understand why, and obviously, most importantly, what are they doing to deliver the promises of an Environment Act? Councillor Payne.
Yeah, I have to admit, my wife worked in the water industry for many years, and these sorts of reports were very common. And Councillor Brown and myself have both raised certain questions over it, and I'm not prepared to take it as it's come. I want to know the provenance, I want to know the data, I want to know if it's been peer reviewed, I want to know an awful lot about the group that's written it and all the rest of it. Some of the things they mention, I'll just throw this out, they talk about Lough Neagh in Northern Ireland, which is one of the most polluted, if not the most polluted lake in the whole of the United Kingdom, but they talk about the rivers that lead into it as being beautiful and fine. Well, that can't be right, because otherwise Lough Neagh wouldn't be in the position it's in. So I would take it at the moment with a very large pinch of salt, and not take it as gospel.
That is very, very helpful, Councillor Payne. And what I may well do, if this is all right, is send you a draft letter, because you've clearly got a lot of experience to bring to that. So if I send you a draft letter, I certainly think that when we get alarming communications telling us that we've got, amongst the worst water in the country, we definitely want to verify that. Because it is alarming. We enjoy our waterways, and it's...
It alarms me that it's alarmed.
Well, quite, yes. Councillor Wilby.
Thanks. And I'm alarmed too. But actually, I saw this as a very good project for scrutiny, because it's short and sharp, and it's something that could be done by us, particularly led by an expert over here, and fed back into the system quite quickly.
No, I agree. So if that's our initial start point on that, and also it is quite nice because it is scrutiny, not just scrutinising portfolio holders and looking inside the council. It is acknowledging that the council is only one part of our county, and that there are a lot of external agencies that we do need to have a chat to check that we're happy with things. The next one was public realm. I've put that as a title because we had litter, fly tipping, maintenance of green space, maintenance of cemeteries, cleansing of street signs. I believe, Councillor Waller, that there either is a new public realm strategy or there is one forthcoming, or have I dreamt that?
No, you haven't dreamt it, Chairman. There is a public realm strategy in development at the moment. I don't know when we will see it. It certainly hasn't been anywhere near Cabinet yet, and the portfolio holders working on it are working on it. So, you know, that's that bit. I would like to say something on the detail within it. I don't know what is meant by maintenance of green space, because a lot of the green spaces that people see are not Rutland County Council, so that might need a bit of unpicking. And similarly with cemeteries, the only cemetery that the County Council maintains is the one in Oakham, although we do maintain the closed cemeteries, the church ones, where they're closed, i.e. no more new bodies are being interred. But live and active ones are the responsibility of the parish councils.
Thank you. That is very useful, because I think certainly judging by the amount of things that have come up in places, I think what would be helpful is if we keep a very close eye on the forward plan, because I certainly think the public realm strategy really should be of interest to scrutiny, not least because it's reflected there. What I might ask, Councillor Waller, is when I come for my quarterly meeting with Cabinet, that perhaps we could just have that as an agenda item, to just explore that a bit and look to see if there's anything that scrutiny could possibly help with. The other thing that I jotted down was parish councils, because as you say quite rightly, there is sometimes a confusion amongst residents as to who is responsible for what. I'm not sure quite how scrutiny addresses that, because I mean we are looking at that might actually come out when we're looking at our customer services. If we've got a load of people contacting the council about something that isn't actually the council's responsibility, that actually might be quite interesting to pick up on that. Are we happy then if we just hold that, and I will discuss further with Cabinet when I see you, which I think is in July? If Councillor Payne.
Oh, sorry.
Did you?
Can I make one brief comment about litter? I'm not going to name the 3 outlets, but there are 3 outlets on the Lands Hill Way close to the junction with the bypass near the showground, all of whom sell coffee, all of whom sell it in takeaway cups, and they sell other things in plastic bottles. Now, they actually, in fairness to them, do try and contain the litter within their own sites. But if you drive a mile or 2 in pretty much any direction, particularly out of the town, sadly, you will see the discarded cups and discarded bottles up the Ashwell Road, down towards Langham and so on. And it was predicted that that would happen, and it is happening. And I think that, I suspect, is where a lot of the complaints about litter is coming from.
And that, again, I sound as though I'm putting everything onto customer services, Councillor Johnson. Can I assure you I'm not after you? But I think that would be interesting, again, with sort of complaints or things that come in. I think it might show up some quite interesting data. Oh, Councillor Johnson.
Again, just a point of information. So I've just looked at the schedule in the draft performance report, and what the scope of what we're looking at is 104 recorded complaints in the year. So it's not as large as might be thought. That would be my view.
And I also think, Councillor Johnson, it's actually important to be having that recorded, because I think, Councillor Waller, your point about, what you hear out and about, anecdote, etc., being really clear that we are not going to be about making sweeping statements. We're happy to investigate sweeping statements, but we do want to be objective. So actually 104, I think, is not bad out of 41,000 people in 12 months. Yeah. So with that, we've got our next step for that. Public transport, a few people have raised well, the concerns are listed there: wait times, capacity, teething issues. I am assuming that because it is a new system, that automatically there are plans for review in place to tease out the teething issues. So, and I think there's still a bus users forum and a bus users group. So I'm wondering if we have got those bases covered as an authority. Councillor Waller.
You are right that there were teething issues with the app. However, the interesting piece of data is that since March, when the new systems rolled out, the usage of our buses has gone up significantly. We have far more people using public transport than we had previously. And I think a lot of the complaints that we had early on, and are still having, are down to people not wanting to use a demand responsive, but wanting to go to the bus stop and the bus turn up at X hour. So it's people getting used to a new system. But as we all know, we couldn't afford, well, A, we couldn't have afforded to carry on subsidising the bus companies for the fixed routes, which is why we've looked at the system. And B, the joy of the demand responsive system is that when it is rolled out in August, every single village in Rutland will have the opportunity, villager will have the opportunity to get a bus within, to go somewhere. Whereas at the moment, an awful lot of our villages, you can't get a bus, there isn't one.
So could I just ask specifically, though, I'm assuming that there will be a review there is a process in place to review that. And I think, again, that would certainly be something that Scrutiny would want to keep their eye on. I'm not sure about putting it on a work programme now when it's such a new system.
There is a continual review process, and Councillor Johnson's nodding his head, and that's because he sits on the project board for transport, and the project board is continually reviewing what is happening, because clearly when there is the rollout, we don't want to be having exactly the same problems as we did with the pilot, and that was why we had the pilot. But I would suggest that if you are going to review it, and that's not a bad thing to do, that you allow 6 months or so after the rollout.
Brilliant. And one piece of very individual feedback, and I will come to you, Councillor Payne, apologies. Apparently one of the teething issues was somebody booking the app, being told that unfortunately the bus was at capacity, and then them seeing the bus going past with one person on it. And Councillor Johnson, you're nodding, so that clearly was one of the teething issues, and it sounds as though that's in hand.
Yeah, if I can, Chair. So since we started the system, where we've started the DRT system, bus journeys are up 20% compared to before, over a similar period. But of course, obviously the data is growing, so I'm not saying it's entirely flat. It's It's a growing, patchy set of data. And interestingly, where people are booking, 66%, approximately 2/3 are using the app, and 1/3 are using the phone. So we're changing customer behaviour as well, which is what we wanted to make sure that we make it more accessible. But the rollout will continue through the year. So, but the initial signs are really good.
We'll come to Councillor Payne because I chopped him off in his prime.
Oh, that's all right. I'm a patient man, Chair. It's okay. 2 quick points. There is supposed to be a bus users forum in July. I haven't got the date in my diary, but I know it's there. Hopefully it'll come through soon. We had a surgery. We have a surgery every month, and we had people come in. None of them actually lived in Oakham, but that didn't matter. And they talked about this very issue. And part of the problem is about changing certain other behaviours. People often book the bus and get their slot, but then they change their mind, but they don't unbook. Yes, and that is why the bus is going by with one person on it. But as far as the booking system is concerned, it's full. So there's other aspects of changing behaviour. We've got to, I won't use the word re-educate, but we've got to get people to adapt their perceptions of what they have to do. So it's fine, book it, great, but if you change your mind, unbook. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Waller.
I was going to make that point, and also in one instance, we had somebody block book for their whole community, but they were the only person who used it when it came down to it. Everybody else said, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Oh yeah, we'll come with you at X time. But they didn't. And that, again, you've got a bus that allegedly has been fully booked. Well, it has been fully booked, but you haven't got the passengers. So Councillor Payne is absolutely right. It is a question of educating residents.
That's made my eye twitch that such a valuable resource should be in effect wasted. Brilliant. Now, and the other one that is on here is the 16 plus post-16 transport. I'm assuming, because obviously a paper has just, well, relatively recently gone through Cabinet, presumably the price points for the DRT will also be considered, and how that supports our young people who are seeking education outside of the county. I'm getting nods from Councillor Johnson.
Can I come in on that one?
Yep, certainly, Councillor Waller.
The price that a young person or their family will be paying to get a season ticket through RCC is what is in the Cabinet paper, and is an increase on what they've paid previously. However, there is no obligation for them to get the ticket that way. And if they are using the DRT system, they will be paying the standard DRT rate. Initially, it's free, but we're not anticipating it going up, or the price being more than you would expect on a standard bus route. And it would work out cheaper if they're going to somewhere like Stamford College than buying a ticket through RCC.
That's very helpful, and dare I say it, that may well come down to the communications that get sent out to parents and young people when they're making those plans. And I will, apologies, just declare a very mild interest. My son will be post-16 next year. That was not a loaded question. So I just realised I will declare that, and if that could be added, and I apologise to the public for looking slightly self-interested. Housing. Now, Councillor Ellison has very kindly been in touch with me. We do have, and apologies, I've got the name wrong, it is a sort of housing association, not board, but it is a committee that meets with Councillor Paul Brown, who's our planning portfolio holder, Councillor Diane Ellison, who is obviously our adults and health. And I know, having sat on it myself, that does cover all of those questions around housing, affordable housing, sheltered accommodation and availability. And I believe that meets quarterly. We have just had the task and finish group and a published report. I would therefore suggest that maybe we want to come back to that in 6 months, but at the moment work has already happened and we have got existing systems in place. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. As the person who surprisingly found himself writing the wretched thing, very short notice, but I'm getting over it. I think I don't want these reports, which I do think is one of the most valuable things that Scrutiny does, is these evidence panels, having had the pleasure of sitting on a number of them. I don't want them to just disappear. And I do think it's important that Scrutiny flags up, right, we've done that, we've written it, we've presented it, and we are going to review it when. And that's the key bit. I would suggest no longer than 12 months. I'd like to get the very nice, slightly bruised members from the Housing Association to maybe not quite so keen to come back and see us again, but in a year's time, and ask them, okay, tell us about the progress you've made.
I completely support that, because I think a lot of time, resource, effort goes into it. I helpfully have written perhaps to review it after 6 months. But I'm happy. I mean, you've done the report and you've done the work. Would you advise 6 or 12?
I would advise 12, in fairness to the housing associations, particularly to one very large housing association who is going through the throes of complete reorganisation. And they're not going to get that far in 6 months, Chair.
I'm very happy, if the rest of the panel, I'm very happy to bow to, well, the fact that you've done a lot of work on it and so therefore can guide us. Councillor Waller.
I think I can help on this one a bit as well. Today, I sent out to all members a letter that I received from government about affordable housing and its maintenance, and some additional duties and timelines are being put on housing associations. That's what the letter was about. And given that, and that will have landed with them this week, I would concur with Councillor Payne that give them 12 months. Not only will you be able to get their responses, but also you'll be able to get some sense from tenants as well as to whether they are responding in the way the government is telling them to. And on the general availability issue, the government also announced in its capital spending this last month that it is making money available for more affordable housing through Homes England for housing associations, and you'll be able to review how many of them have bid for that, because they may well not have even bothered to bid, who's to say.
So now I don't want to jump around on the agenda. I've taken the liberty of putting housing review for the 18th of June 2026, which is 12 months. I'm mindful there may be a change of chair and a new panel after annual council. However, it does acknowledge the 12 month. If are the panel happy with the bowing to the wisdom and knowledge of Councillor Payne?
God, you're in trouble if you are. I think if I have also the pleasure of being on this committee, I won't forget to bring it up to whoever is the chair.
Brilliant, thank you. Now the next one, which I know that Councillor Johnson will be absolutely thrilled about, council tax. I've suggested that we have a very clear budget setting process. It comes to scrutiny, there's public engagement, that actually we're already onto that in inverted commas. If everybody's happy with that, brilliant. Leisure is a tricky one. We've got things raised with lack of things to do, lack of facilities, libraries, play equipment. I'm pretty sure that that is parish council, not us. I'm wondering what the panel's view is in terms of that crucial thing, what our role is with leisure, what value we can add in real terms, because I think a heck of a lot of it is to do with the budget that we have and a focus on and actually a legal obligation to deliver statutory services, but I will open that up to panel for, because interestingly, that's the only one I haven't actually written any sort of pre-meeting thoughts down. Councillor Wilby.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No, I'd agree with you. I think, it would be nice for the portfolio holder to include in one of her reports to Cabinet exactly what the state of play is, and perhaps that copied into by the Chief Exec in the updates of what's going on. I think it's one of those things that we don't need to delve into.
Thank you, Councillor Wilby. That has reminded me that actually we could well make sure that the members' briefings that come out, that may be a possibility to say, actually, these things have come up at scrutiny. We'd be very grateful if we could have some targeted updates, which hopefully would be part of business as usual, and also just lift a little bit of pressure off Cabinet portfolio holders, particularly, I'm about to say the long-suffering Councillor Wise, because there's a heck of a lot on here for this. If people are happy with that, I'm going to jog on to send. We have got children's services reform already on our forward work plan, and I believe until we've actually had that briefing, there isn't much to do until we've actually done that. And it was around budget management was the issue that was raised. Yes, Councillor.
Me again, sorry. As a member of the Audit and Risk Committee, I can assure you, Chair, that the send issue, what we call the send credit card, is constantly on in the minds of anybody on the Audit and Risk Committee on a regular basis. Trust me.
Brilliant. So in which case, I mean, I'm going to note down that there's audit and risk purely from the fiscal point of view. As I say, we have already got children's services reform on the forward plan, and I think, let's wait and hear what those reforms are before we start delving into it. Yes, Councillor Waller.
The council is looking at a number of potential activities to reduce the spend, the SND overspend, but they are only being considered if they have a positive impact on the children and young people as well and their families. So we're not just trying to reduce it for the sake of, in fact, quite the reverse. The various plans that are in train, which when they're a bit clearer will come to Cabinet and Council if appropriate, are young people centred, and it's the benefit of the young people. But why I put my hand up in the first place was the government has also announced that they are going to be issuing a review of the send situation, overspends and what happens to them and all that sort of thing in the autumn. So it might be best for you to wait until after that before you formulate what you might want to look at, because if you start working now, I think we can all guarantee that it will all be thrown up in the air by the vagaries of central government.
Yeah, and I think also that we need to be really mindful what, in effect, our hands are tied by central government policy and legislation. And I think, I'm very pleased to hear that it is about the children and what they need to achieve their full potential in Rutland. And I'm pleased to hear that that is at the centre of considerations. Councillor Wilby.
Thanks. I'd agree that the portfolio holder has got enough on his plate there, and having held it for 8 years, I know that there is a continual battle with the Cabinet to make sure that you've got everything, all your ducks in line. It will never be easy, but the audit risk team are there to sort it out. I don't think this is something for us.
Thank you very much. The next one is local government reform. Clearly, we've already got a cross-party working group. We are currently on a public engagement exercise, and I think that is well and truly covered. and therefore we don't need to sort of really discuss it much further. Not to dismiss it at all, but I think it's being discussed every which way elsewhere. Adult social care, navigating the complaints process, I would suggest that that is just quite simply a desktop exercise and feedback perhaps for November in terms of what does the complaints process look like. It sounds to me as though it is a case of actually being able to use it rather than it per se, but I think that might be helpful just to have a little explore with that, but a desktop thing. Yes, Councillor.
And to quote Councillor Waller, what about compliments as well?
This, I did get the impression though this was about actually navigating it, so therefore using it and how user friendly it was, rather than as it were how the complaint itself. It was more the how easy is it to look at that. I mean, my understanding, I may go back to the ward member concern just to put a little bit more meat onto that. Yes, Councillor Waller.
If it is about navigating the system, Chairman, then it logically sits with your earlier customer service piece of work.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Councillor Waller. Councillor Wilby.
Sorry to add a sentence, but I think that would be a good brief for us when we have the members' briefs, you know, later on when they've got it. So it comes in as a brief.
Yep, and I think that, and again, I think, you know, members' briefings, we are used to those, as it were, the officers determining what would be useful for us to know, because obviously they are doing the operational work. However, what might be helpful as well is that we're saying, oh, actually, could we have a sort of paragraph on, could we have the data? And obviously, I know that we all read them very carefully, but I think that is actually using a system that is already in place to conduct some of these desktop exercises actually would be an efficient use of time. Brilliant. Now, parking. We have got a work proposal on the next agenda item. Oh, hello.
Sorry, Chair, you've missed an item, the level crossing at
Oh,
Oakham.
how could, oh my goodness, it's as though I'm trying to ostracise the whole of Oakham, which is not the case. Now, the level crossing, we did mention that it is completely out of our jurisdiction. I would suggest the fact that all members, including obviously Cabinet, have received this collation. I suspect this isn't news to Councillor Wise, and I suspect that that is regularly mentioned on the various committees, but I think unfortunately that is simply a case of noting, and yeah, I mean, it is Network Rail, not us. Obviously, we do now have the lovely bypass. I say now, I've made it sound shiny and new. I know it's been there for a bit, but I'm fairly sure the bypass was in part a bit of a response to that. Councillor Payne.
I'm going to ask you to indulge me for a couple of minutes here, Chair.
Go on, Councillor
I
Payne.
think I'm probably the number one there, when it says one, that's probably me. There are, in fact, two crossings in Oakham. Yes. Right, and they're both equally difficult. This is very much an Oakham issue, and I recognise that, but it has a greater impact. It's also a very negative economic impact to the town as a whole, because I was stuck there for 12 minutes this evening, and again thinking, am I going to make the meeting? Am I going to be late? Happens all the time. And the queue, when I got through down the high street, was back to a certain famous pub after a fictitious admiral. That's how far it had gone back. And you think of the road safety implications, you think of the pedestrian safety, you think of the frustration levels. Those crossings are probably closed more now in an average day than they are open. I would think Councillor Brown did a lot of work on this. So although it's not our direct responsibility, we in our county town are suffering on a daily basis, and I think we've got to. But I'm not suggesting you are sweeping under the carpet, don't get me wrong, but I don't think we can just do a Pontius Pilate. I think we need to have words with British Rail and say, is there nothing you can do? I was there 12 minutes before the train came through. 12 minutes, and you can feel the frustration in my voice. You can imagine how it was with all the dozens of other car drivers.
Oh, yeah, I mean, and also, although I don't live in Oakham, I come into Oakham a lot, and absolutely the level crossing can make the difference between being on time and embarrassingly late for things. Could I suggest, and actually occasionally I've been when the level crossing has gone down and there has actually been no train, which has been very annoying, I can assure you. What I would suggest then, because I'm certainly not brushing it under the carpet, I'm just being realistic in terms of what we can achieve. I don't think there is any harm in a letter just saying obviously trains are an important part of our country's infrastructure and East Midlands, etc. But to note, these things have happened, and also I'd be interested to know how many times the crossing goes down for an unnecessarily length of time, or indeed for no reason at all, which I've certainly seen. So would that help?
I think it would help, Chair. I think it would be interesting to know their operating procedures. But presumably there is, not making it up, there is a reason that these things are down this length of time and why. It also might be an opportunity to involve the Oakham Town Council, because I'm sure the handful of councillors, bless them, that are on the Town Council, this must be the top thing that they get. And, it's their town as much as it's ours.
And yes, I've jotted that down, and I very much like the sense of actually let's get, Oakham Town Council need to be on that letter, and it is nice to remember those levels of local government aiming to do the best for their community. So very happy with that. Councillor Wilby.
Isn't this a task for the Chief Executive?
Oh, over to you, Jane. I'm looking for scrutiny officer support. You can come back outside. So we definitely want to have a letter sent. Who should the letter come from?
I would suggest that you as chair speak to the monitoring officer and get her advice.
Beautiful response. Yeah. That is I tell you what, I love this panel because we are all officer and elected members alert. But I do think, so there will be a letter. I do agree with you that Oakham Town Council should be involved or have that name on it. I will seek advice from the monitoring officer in terms of the best way to approach that, and I think that would be quite sensible. Parking, having almost skipped out the level crossing, parking we are going to come to on the item 10 because a proposal has been put in for that. What I would suggest though, just to note, the parking issues raised have very much been around enforcement and accessibility. So if we could just, no pun intended, park that thought until we come to item 10, I would be very grateful. Transformation, I think that changes to service lessons learned regarding engagement with communities impacted, I think that actually falls under a customer services piece of work. If everybody's happy with that, because I think whether the communication's working well by your contacts with the council, and not complaints, but actually are people needing to phone up for support that they could have got online? Is there a demographic attached to that, and that is it working? Councillor Wilby.
Sorry. Again, the transformation has been bubbling along for the last couple of years, and I just wonder whether, an update covering all these things, once again in a members' briefing to everyone, would be the useful way of going ahead. Gives everyone a chance to see how things are going, and if there's a decent discussion period attached to it, then those questions can be raised.
Brilliant. And I've put that down. And what is actually very interesting, well, I think it's quite interesting, she said selfishly, the fact that members' briefings are actually being mentioned in a scrutiny panel in terms of using the mechanisms. We know we've got a tight budget. We know that's reflected in terms of the number of people we've got working for this authority, and actually using the mechanisms and processes that we are already established, I think is good practice with that. So I've jotted that down. Employment and economy, and I have already mentioned, I've corrected that to Councillor Powell with her portfolio. We have very recently just had a scrutiny task and finish group on that, which was very much informing the new economic strategy. And I think, therefore, to propose additional work for scrutiny isn't the right time for that. I do think possibly a bit like the housing one, the question is, when are we going to review the outcomes from that? So could I suggest that we are actually looking at reviewing that task and finish group? I mean, I'm picking 12 months, and I'm copying Councillor Payne there, but I'm just plucking that out of the air. I don't know what panel members' views are on that, but we have spent time on a task and finish group. It's sensible to actually review. Right, I think I'm taking that as a silent agreement, which sometimes I certainly find the best with my teenagers. Community safety, availability of drugs and how that is dealt with, I think that is a matter for the police. And if Councillor Payne.
Sorry, this came up a few months ago. A member of this panel discovered something, and we followed it up. We came across an example of cuckooing going on here in Oakham, which was very much part of a whole section on our recent evidence panel with the Housing Association, because it was a Housing Association property. I'm being careful what I say here. That was taken, that was sorted. I'll lay you any money you like. It's someone else, somewhere else in Oakham, that's going on right now. That county lines is a fact. It's a fact here in Rutland. It's a fact here in Oakham and Uppingham and all around. And it is a police matter. And as a police matter, I suspect they're severely under-resourced to deal with, Chair.
So what I am minded, because I know that our community safety team, which I believe is one person, works very, very hard and has a very close relationship with the police. In terms of value added for scrutiny, I'm not sure that there is a role for scrutiny, noting that we've got our community safety partnership. What I do think that does need to be made very clear with members of the public actually is the role that they play in sharing intelligence, etc. I'm going to prioritise panel members over non-panel members in this first instance. Councillor Lambert.
It's just a quick one. I mean, I agree completely. It isn't a point for a matter for scrutiny necessarily, but I think as a wider point, something for councillors, sort of how we deal with these incidents when they come up. The incident that Councillor Payne referenced was quite a grisly incident, and I went to the wrong person in the first instance. So I just think there's perhaps a piece of work to be done somewhere in the council about making sure our councillors know how to handle these situations with county lines or cocoons, I think it was referred to. Cuckooing. Yeah, just worth mentioning the point of.
So what I'll do then, because I think the role for scrutiny column, I'm going to change its title and possibly call it Next Steps. That absolutely, because certainly when I've spoken to the police, it is the intelligence. Yes, there are tight resources. It is the intelligence the police receive in order to be able to target that resource effectively. And actually, I think, again, Councillor Lambert, not necessarily on this one, as councillors, we are a port of call for residents who maybe are worried, scared, etc. And we absolutely need to be on top of the correct signposting. So I'm going to pick that up outside of the meeting, because obviously we have got our, website with those adult social care and etc. But I think your point, refreshing councillors in terms of that crucial signposting, is, it is vital we get it right. Thank you, Councillor Councillor Wilby.
Would it be a task to put before the PCC, the Police and Crime Commissioner, to use his staff and get the right people associated with it and give him a chance to come and, talk to us once again as a briefing or something like that?
Yeah, I think, because again, I think being reassured that LLR is a big area and each area actually has very different sort of pressures on their policing, and I think making sure that Rutland has its fair share, noting that some crimes are fewer. The crime data, for example, for Uppingham is, I think, allegedly one of the safest things in the places in the country. However, the things that we've touched on this evening are miserable for the people involved. And in terms of looking after our vulnerable people and actually reaching those people who are hard to reach, actually, I think that's a very good point. Councillor Payne.
Point out, I can't say too much about how I know, but there's a big difference between the drug problem, say, in Leicester and the drug problems out here in the rural areas. In Leicester, it's much more in your face. It's actually in some ways easy to deal with by the police because it's there in front of them on the streets and they just follow the people round. In the countryside, it's much more hidden. Nobody really knows too much about the numbers or anything because it's incredibly difficult to collate them. And they only come up on occasions like this recent case came up almost by accident when somebody finally said,
and I'm just going to be very careful that we can't identify the case. So good, and I know you were being very sharp on that, and sorry to just chip in case on that. So I think Police Crime Commissioner, as well as the signposting information around rural and being very front and centre, particularly in the context of central government budgets and central government perceived view of rural communities, we need to be very, very clear about those challenges that are specific to a rural area. So when I found the right piece of paper, I shall write rural next to the Police Crime Commissioner. Councillor Waller.
Thank you. That picks up what I was initially going to say, and that is, you were talking about speeding earlier, which is a police issue. This is clearly a police issue. So as a committee, you might want to get a series of questions together to put to the Police and Crime Commissioner when he comes. But on the issue, specifics of the rural drugs scene, I was reading only today that for younger teenagers in some parts of the country, and I have no idea whether we're involved, because the article only quoted the Cheshire area, some way from here, that ketamine now is becoming a much used drug because it is easy to get and cheap. And the lurid headline was 13-year-olds spend their pocket money on ketamine, not crisps, which was a bit disconcerting. But it's again, it's a Police and Crime Commissioner primarily issue.
Brilliant, thank you, Councillor Waller. Now that, and I do appreciate that that was a very long agenda item. I hope that the panel have found that that is beneficial. That is the start point. I will be aiming to get that done first thing in the morning to capture what our actions are. Some of those things will pop up by name, not rediscussion, because I am mindful of time, on the item 10, which I shall move as seamlessly onto, which is a review of the work plan. In your document pack, I would like to deal with the work plan first and then look at the parking policy refresh. It's page 9 of the papers. Has everybody got that in front of them? Good? Right. So, the 31st, we have already got Rutland Same Day Access Public Consultation. Turning over We've got gaps for September and October, and I'm not suggesting that there is no constitutional need to fill things in here and now. Looking at what we have discussed, though, I am proposing that adult social care complaints process, that we possibly look at that in November as a sort of bit of a desktop exercise for that. Budget we've got, and I am mindful that we don't have overly packed agendas, because I think people lose a bit of concentration, and we need to have quality. We've then got a gap for February, for March, April and May, but I have put housing review into June, with the caveat that that may well be a new panel, but it is literally 12 months from now. From our previous agenda item, we've got a few little next steps, mostly coming from me, to get done first, to then, I think, slot things into the rest of that work programme. I'm very happy to be guided by you. There will be performance management, and there will be the children's reform feedback. But as we've discussed, we haven't got fixed dates there. Are people content, and I will come to parking in a minute, are people content that we get those next steps done, get the outcome from those next steps, and then see what further needs to be added on to that work plan? Does that feel comfortable? Yeah. Oh, yay, I'm making sense from the chair. I'm very excited. Thank you, Councillor Lambert. And sorry, performance management will also be coming in, and customer services, I think we're keen to look at that. But again, Councillor Johnson, you'll be relieved to know we are not holding your feet to the fire, because we want to add value, not put you on the hop. Please let that be noted. Good. Parking, we have got if everybody's happy with that outcome, we've then got the parking proposal. We have had parking come up as a member issue, but very much from enforcement. We are being asked, as you can see from the paper, to basically sort of have a look at the refreshment of the parking policy. I personally had one little quibble, was that the role for scrutiny apparently was noting, which I think that might need a little bit of a tweaking, but the fundamental principle of having parking, I thought, was the right one, but I'm not comfortable with it simply our role being to note it. Councillor Waller, would you like to add any more on the intentions of this?
Yes. When the portfolio holder proposed to the previous scrutiny committee, under the previous chair, to do a review of parking, the intent was that scrutiny did effectively a task and finish group, looking at all the issues around parking and making a recommendation to Cabinet on a way forward. But the previous scrutiny panel declined. There is a savings target, or an income generation target, depending on which way you look at it, linked to parking in the budget. And so Cabinet decided that we couldn't just leave it. And so that work that we thought scrutiny might be interested in doing, we are now having to employ a consultant to do, because there isn't capacity within the RCC team to do it. And we are anticipating that the outcome of that consultant's work will be coming to us sometime in September. But best laid plans and all that.
Yeah, could I just be very clear, though, if you were paying a consultant, that would be suggesting that you are elevating non-expert panel members to be replacing consultants, and I would suggest,
to be frank,
we need to be very careful with that.
No, to be frank, it's a consultant, because they are the people you get on a short-term basis, but they're being told what we're looking for them to do. For example, to look at how much we charge compared with other authorities, how much our different car parks are being utilised, to look at the logic of having a long term in one place and a short term in another. Those are all things that members of this panel would have been able to do.
Oh, I'm still going to just say, though, that is doing officers' work. Our job is about residents and adding value, not, I think, a sort of basic research in terms of what car parks are charging. And actually, interestingly, what members have raised it is around enforcement, how we enforce. There may well be a link in terms of we need to raise funds to pay the wages of the civil enforcement officers to be around more. But I would suggest, with respect, and as the chair of this panel, I'm not convinced that dictating to members a sort of job list of what you want to find out is quite how I was imagining scrutiny working. Councillor Payne.
I hadn't actually finished my sentence.
I defer.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. And therefore, as an organisation has been contracted to do this work in terms of the future of the car parks in Rutland, if you want to look at that, then I suggest you wait. Well, you can review what they've done, and that's fine. But that was what I was going to say. In terms of enforcement, I don't understand what the issue is.
So I think the issue is that currently enforcement, I believe, happens from 10 a.m. till 6 p.m. Some of our parking restrictions are there because of highways accessibility and safety. Various people know that they can park across a drop curb, park on a double yellow, and actually they will in effect get away with it because there is no enforcement in Rutland after 6 p.m. So I think that was my understanding of why enforcement was brought up there. I will now go to Councillor Payne.
What I would say is that I think the conversation that has just taken place explains why the previous scrutiny committee didn't feel that it was comfortable in taking on that role.
In terms of enforcement, our enforcement officers do operate outside those hours on occasion, depending on what the issue is. They don't do it as much as we as members might like, simply because of budgetary constraints, and therefore it's something that needs to be looked at in terms of budget setting.
Yeah, and that I absolutely agree with, and certainly the enforcement is on occasion not the norm. Rutland Water is something that actually springs to mind, where civil enforcement officers altered their work routine because of the amount of complaints about that, and actually, you know, impacting our residents' day-to-day lives unfavourably. So, panel, how are we feeling about parking and what the value can be added in terms of parking in general? As I say, it is something that other members have raised. I do think it is around enforcement and accessibility. I'm open to sort of suggestions and views. Obviously, we need to make a decision about this actual proposal form, but again, I do feel that what Councillor Waller has outlined, reviewing it or noting it, maybe we want to be looking at it in the context of civil enforcement and understanding, does more money mean more enforcement? I'm opening that up to the panel. Councillor Wilby.
I think this is very much a cabinet and portfolio problem. The portfolio holder will go through it and decide with the staff what is the best line to take, and then produce her proposal to the cabinet, who will then have the jurisdiction of how much it's costing and can we afford it. And I think we should leave it up to that process.
Councillor Payne.
I think we have a role in the process. I agree totally with Councillor Wilby. It's a question of what that role is and when we actually come into it, and that I think was the main nub of the argument for the last committee, and we weren't convinced we were coming in at the right time. I think we have a role, it's a question of when.
And what? Sorry, Councillor Johnson, I've been indicated that I've been ignoring you. Oh, I'm sorry. Jane.
Thank you, Chair. What I was going to say was that one of the roles of scrutiny is to review new policies that are coming in place and make recommendations to Cabinet. So the committee could actually agree to actually review the new parking policy, see what the portfolio holder and the officers have come up with and the consultant, and then they may agree with it or they may disagree with it, but they could note it and make recommendations to Cabinet.
You know, that sounds like the role of scrutiny to me, Chair.
Yeah. Councillor Lambert. So could I then, in terms of Chatfield?
Yes, sorry, this, I'm not sure if it's appropriate at this time, but the process of notifying the local town councils about any increase in parking, I know when it was last done, I happened to come across the town clerk who was in the car park, and that was the first he heard of an increase when he saw the notice going up on the board.
Thank you ever so much for raising that, because I would suggest that actually it shouldn't be a surprise, particularly not to the town council. What I've noted on my helpful piece of paper, that when we are, because I'm cheerfully thinking we've got nods for reviewing, that actually that is a question or something that we look out for in that paper, saying, okay, who are the key stakeholders, who are you engaging with this? And that is a very, very key question. So Councillor Linda, if you could just make a mental note of that, and make sure you check that paper and then ask that question. Jane, first of all, I'm going to get a definite agreement from the panel. What do you want the committee to achieve? Could I please ask that we change the 2 notes to review, if that's, because that feels slightly more potent, review, and then with the aim of, if deemed necessary, making recommendations to Cabinet before approval. I'm hoping this timeline's going to work. Could I propose that, and could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Wilby. All those in favour? Super. Jane, could I please leave that to officers to determine when the appropriate time to fit that onto our work plan?
Yes, Chair, I've already spoken with the Transport Manager, and I believe she's planning on submitting the report at the next meeting at the end of July, but I will confirm that with her. Brilliant.
That is very helpful. Is there anything else people want to bring up under item 10? And I am looking at panel members. Anything else for item 10, or are we happy that we've got an evolving work plan? We've got some next steps outlined under item 9 to inform that. And as I say, I do want to underscore this is a working document. Nothing is set in stone, and it is okay for us to sort of review and revise our opinion. So if people are happy with that, I will then move on to item 11, which is group and panel updates. And this is to receive a verbal update on the Food Waste Strategy Communication Working Group. Councillor Payne.
Myself, Councillor Chatfield and Jane had a lovely chat for the half an hour or so that we were here earlier in the week. We didn't get awfully far because it was just myself, Councillor Chatfield and Jane that were there. So a certain officer got her calendar in a twist and wasn't able to appear, and neither were any other of the councillors. So to say what progress did we make, not a lot, I'm afraid. However, It is that time of year, as you know, Chair, and it is difficult to get meetings at this time. We have gone for another meeting because I'm an optimist, and I think we've got it down for 10 o'clock on Tuesday the 15th of July here, and I've sent out a little message. I don't quite know how to suddenly have adopted the role of chair of this particular thing, but that's only a pro tem chair. Don't look so happy, and we'll see how that goes. Right? At least if I do become chair of this, it'll be because I know I'm doing it. And we're going to have to get together. One of the things we're going to definitely have to decide is what it is we're looking at, get a work plan down, get a plan of action, and I'm a great believer in deadlines. How long do we want this to run? Not that long, I would suggest, but we haven't got any further than that. And I will be looking for inputs from the bigger group when the time comes.
Well, with that update, I think you've talked yourself into the permanent role of the chair by being highly competent. Brilliant. And thank you ever so much for that, Councillor Payne. And again, that piece of work, jokes aside, is really, really important. We need to get those changes of behaviour, and we need to get that food waste out of the black bin into the food caddies. And I believe that that's scheduled to start as a service next year. Yeah, not a lot of time. Needless to say, if there's any support that I can offer, please give me a holler. Lovely. Oh, sorry, did anybody have any questions? Are you happy for me? Any questions on that item?
No, I think Councillor Payne has covered that really well.
Stop sucking that.
No, I think, as we said before, compliments as well as complaints. There we go. So, item number 12, any urgent business? I'm unaware of any.
We haven't been notified of any urgent business, Chair.
Super. And then the date of the next meeting is the 31st of July. Councillor Carr will be chairing that because I will be enjoying the opportunity to camp with my children in Norfolk, and I'm looking forward to that immensely. Thank you very much. And so therefore I will close the meeting at just before 10 to 9. Yeah, do put an accurate time. I haven't got my right glasses on and I'm squinting at a clock. Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. And thank you very much, panel. I hope we all feel that was a productive meeting.